We're all just stories in the end, so make it a good one. So I've had a couple of folks who follow this channel and comment regularly ask me about doing a ranking of the series finale for all of the series up to this point, series 1 through 10. And I debated it. Initially, I didn't think I was going to do that because I kind of feel like my thoughts on the various finales get covered in a lot of the other lists that I do. And that's true to a certain extent, but I struck on something that I do now want to do this. But the first thing I'm going to do is I need to establish that on this occasion, this one occasion, probably one, we'll see, I am breaking my main rule with ranking Doctor Who episodes. Every other list I've ever done up to this point, I've counted two-parters as only one story. This time, I'm not doing that. I'm looking only at the final episode itself, not the immediately preceding one, which is pretty relevant because most of these are two-part stories. Why am I suspending this rule that I normally go by? Well, because if I don't, then I'm going to have to keep touching again and again and again and again and again on one being better than the other, whether the second one is better than the first one or the first one is better than the second one, and then sort of explaining how they balance and I'll probably still touch on that to a certain extent, but I really want to talk about the final thing we got for any given series. The last go, the last impression. This was how everything closed out. Not just the immediate story, but the series. So only last episodes on their own. So on that basis, I'm doing 10 because I'm not going to deal with the Tennant specials. They didn't really have a proper series finale in my mind. I mean, I suppose you could count End of Time Part 2, but I am opting to not address that one here. So that means we have series 1 through 10. So let's start at the bottom. You all know what it is. I will keep it short because I have ranted plenty about it. Hell Bent. What a freaking mess. This episode, I hate this episode, but I'm going to restrain myself from ranting and raving and screaming about it this time. But to reiterate briefly, this episode undermines two brilliant episodes that came before, Face the Raven and Heaven Sent. It undermines the death of Clara by effectively bringing her back from the dead. And no, it doesn't matter that she's going to go back and eventually meet that death because she can do it. She can fly around the universe for as long as she wants until that happens. Effectively, she's become immortal until she chooses not to be. That is a complete undermining of her death. And it undermines Heaven Sent because Heaven Sent was all about the Doctor coping with his grief. But now, oh, hey, look at that. She's not dead anymore. And on top of that, he doesn't even remember her. So he doesn't even remember having to have grieved for her in the first place. And then in addition to that, it is a lousy payoff for the very long built-up return to Gallifrey of the Doctor. And it's thrown away for this whole thing with him going to extreme lengths to save Clara. I hate this episode. Let's move on. Number 9, The Wedding of River Song. People were probably expecting this to be towards the bottom of the list anyway because it cropped up on my worst episodes written by Moffat list, and it's just kind of higgledy-piggledy, convoluted. It's a bit of a mess. It doesn't make me angry the way that Hellbent made me angry, but between the explanation for how the Doctor didn't actually die, which is a weird cop-out that doesn't make a complete and total sense, to seeding this really awesome idea of all of time happening at once and then not really doing anything of note with that, having a couple of cool moments that just don't add up to a heck of a lot. And I like River, but she just this feels like her most obligatory appearance, at least in my opinion. Number 8, The Big Bang. I know a lot of people really like this one. A lot of people list this two-parter as one of their favorites. Here's the thing, and this is the first time I'm going to have to mention, in relation to the two-parter. Pandorica Open set up a lot of interesting stuff and had a hell of a cliffhanger. Big Bang Theory doesn't feel like a story to me. It feels like a logical puzzle. It feels like an exercise in tying up loose ends. it doesn't feel like a story. It doesn't engage me emotionally. It doesn't hook me in with what the characters are going through. It's just going, look while I do this magic trick to fix that setup that I ended the universe and everything, and ha! And the entire universe gets rebooted. Think about that for a second. Previous episode, the universe ended. All of it. And there's no lasting ramifications from that. None. That... there have been a lot of Deus Ex Machina episodes and Deus Ex Machina finales, especially in the history of the show. In my mind, this is the most egregious one because it removes any ramifications from something that should have had massive consequences and just doesn't. And he keeps introducing plot elements and then dropping them because it doesn't want to have to tie up that end. Like young Amelia. Like, how do we deal with the fact that we've got an older and younger version of Amy here? Oh, never mind. Little version of Amy's gone. Bye. There's still moments that ring true. There's a sense of triumph when Amy remembers the Doctor and he comes back. That does actually still work. There are some sad moments in it. So there's enough bits that click that it isn't lower than this, and it didn't show up on my worst episodes that Moffat wrote list, but I consider this episode incredibly overrated by a lot of fans. Number 7, the last of the Time Lords. Yeah, again, a bit of a Deus Ex Machina where, how do we fix the Doctor? He's all aged. Oh, look, he's magically back. And I like that in and of itself. I can almost kind of roll with, because I'm a sucker for stories about the power of stories. So the idea that Martha spent a year just going around the world telling the story of the Doctor and the strength and power of his story and his legend, restoring him. It's a little cheesy, but I can kind of go there. Except we're also going to roll things back, undo a year worth of hell so that there's no lasting consequences to the fact that the entire Earth got invaded and the only people who remember are these hands full of people. Like that, if you're not going to pan out the consequences for a big event, don't do the big event. Because it's just for show at that point. There are some decent parts in it. I think the death of the Master is definitely a good part. It's well handled. I really love this twisted sense of triumph he has when he's dying in the Doctor's arms. And, there's bits like that. There's stuff like that that works. But on the whole, this is just kind of, I was going to say it's functional. I'm not even entirely sure it's that. Number 6. Death in Heaven. We're starting to get into the episodes that I more or less like and don't have a ton of problems with, but, they're just, at least for me, going to get better and better and better as we go up. So Death in Heaven, it squanders a couple of good ideas that probably shouldn't have been tied to it, like the Nether Sphere. That, I'm not entirely sure why that's here and why it's necessary in terms of connecting it to the whole Cyberman thing. Like I'm not saying I don't understand the explanation and the logic of what they're doing. I get it. I mean, thematically. I don't understand what the whole thing with retaining dead people does to actually add to the story if we're dealing with potential Cyberman invasion. The two don't build on each other in a particularly coherent way or a way that elevates much. That said, I mean, I love Michelle Gomez as Missy. She's a lot of fun. I actually felt that Danny had a pretty good send-off as a character as far as these things go. And the little note that is given to the Brigadier, some people can call it fan service. Yeah, fine, sure, it's fan service. But for me, it worked. And I was down with that. So this is a decent one. It's good. It's fine. But there are better. Number 5, Journey's End. This has a number of things going for it that just work really well. I mean, first off, Donna. And I've talked about this before. The Donna's loss of memory kills me every time. And when she's begging him to not do that to her, that she is making the choice that she would rather die than lose all this, and he takes that choice away from her. And that's tragic. That's really, really sad. And it's also important because it helps mitigate what is otherwise a bit of a Deus Machina resolution, where all of a sudden Donna is able to magically do all this stuff and defeat the Daleks in one go. But the reason that that doesn't completely ruin it is there are consequences after that. Yes, she swooped in and saved the day, but it's not going to stay good, not even for very long. And I do kind of wish that, like, there was more of a point to giving Rose her own aging Doctor clone, besides just, I don't know, making fans of Rose happy, I suppose. So that was a little weird, but Davros works really well in this episode. It maybe gets a little too indulgent with the goodbyes, but nothing compared to End of Time Part 2, certainly. But this is one where it's starting to find the balance between what works and what doesn't. And we are starting to get into the ones that I do really genuinely enjoy. Number 4, The Name of the Doctor. I had a bit of an internal debate about where to place this one, because part of me wants to bump it down in my estimation, given where a lot of it went. Like, in hindsight, I really don't like the larger implications of what was done later with the fact that Clara was scattered across his timeline. I mean, that's part of the whole hybrid mess with Hellbent and everything that was so wrong with that. And I don't like that it has its roots in here. But if I take that aside and I don't deal with what happened later as an impact of this episode and just deal with the episode on its own, yeah, I really like this. I feel like the build-up towards the presumed death of the Doctor is good and well done and feels properly intimidating and scary. I love Richard E. Grant as the Great Intelligence. The Whispermen are throwaway monsters. They're better than the Snowmen, though. I'll give them that much. But Richard E. Grant does so much to sell the obsessive nature and the intensity of the hatred this character has for the Doctor. And I love that he willingly sacrifices himself, not to enact some greater plan or to accomplish some greater scheme, but just to be sure that he wins and kills this guy. I think that works so well. And I mean, that cliffhanger, holy crap. Holy crap. What a killer ending that was. Again, payoff for it was but yeah, I do really like this episode, even though a lot of what fed directly off of it after I have issues with. Number 3, The Parting of Ways. This is honestly a big part of why I disconnected the two-parters and dealt with these episodes on their own, because I don't like Bad Wolf as an episode. I don't like it very much at all, actually, but I do enjoy The Parting of Ways. I like it quite a bit. I love the Doctor, not setting everything up, but not being willing to do it, which is a recurrence of stuff we've seen from him before, going back, to Genesis of the Daleks and things like that. So I like how we get that aspect of him. I love how threatening the Daleks themselves are. The goodbye that he gives to Rose, both when he actually regenerates and even the hologram one, are wonderfully touching. The Bad Wolf thing is something, in terms of it taking over Rose, is something I've gotten better with over time. And maybe this is cheating because it's taking into account stuff that happened way later, but it's part of my assessment of this, so I'm tossing it in there. I'm much more okay with it now in the wake of Day of the Doctor versus when I saw it for the first time, because having met the Bad Wolf entity in that episode and getting a better sense of it being scattered and being a recurring thing, and now feeling like I understand it as an entity that possesses her, as opposed to this weird thing that just happens when she looks into the TARDIS. What? This all works much better for me than it did the first time that I watched it. And yeah, like I said, maybe that's cheating, but hey, it bumped it up for me. Number 2, Doomsday. This one's high up on the list for primarily cheesy reasons. It's Daleks versus Cybermen. How can you not love that? And also, this is another one that benefits from not being attached to the previous episode, because Army of Ghosts is fine. It's a decent setup, but it's not a great episode in and of itself. This, oh, so much fun. And the return of the Daleks is probably the best it's been in terms of like the impact of, oh God, they're back. It hit better here than it ever did anywhere else. Partially because they come back every year, but that's another conversation. So we've got that. And then, you know, the triumph of getting rid of them. And then Rose and that wall. And the music kicks in. And the weight of it. And the sadness of it. Oh, it does hit you. Like, I revised this list a couple times. And this, for a time, was in the number one spot. It came really close because the stuff I like about it, I love. But there are little nitpicks, like the opening with Rose's narration, like "This was the day I died." That was cheap and unnecessary. It is possibly maybe a little too fan servicey, but I would argue that it's fan service that works. And you know, Mickey coming back was nice, but a little just conciliatory. But these are minor things. Like there's just a thrill and a fun, and then ultimately a sadness to this episode that just works really well. So if you've been keeping track with your checklist and going through process of elimination, you know what my number one is. And I didn't think this was going to be my number one, because I remember when I first saw it, I was initially a little disappointed with it. But that was only because of the previous episode being even better. So that means it's time to talk about what I feel is the best series finale of Doctor Who, The Doctor Falls. And this episode in isolation does benefit from no longer being attached to World Enough in Time, because it looks worse in comparison. But when I actually do take them apart and look at it as its own entity, I love this. There's so much I love about this. And the whole thing with Bill and talking with the Doctor, and we see her both as the Cyberman and as Bill, so that it never lets us forget what she now is, but at the same time we don't lose the interaction and the chemistry between these characters and these actors who are so good together. And the sadness of the Doctor having to answer her questions when she asks, "You said you could fix me. Were you lying? No. Were you right? No. He thought he could fix this, but he can't. Not this time." The intensity from Capaldi when he is just shouting at the Master and then pleading with him, just do it because it's right. Do it because it's kind. And that really felt like the perfect encapsulation for Capaldi's Doctor. Be kind. Yes, that just felt like it said everything. Nardole has some nice moments. The whole thing with the different times on the different floors, it's playing out in interesting ways. Missy and the Master plays out in a good way, and just her laughing like that, you fool. Yeah, it feels right. And in so many ways, having learned more about how Twice Upon a Time came into production, basically only because if they didn't, Chris Chibnall wasn't planning to do a Christmas special. He wasn't ready to do that, and if they didn't have a Christmas special, they were going to lose that slot and possibly not get it again. And that's why Twice Upon a Time happened. And now, knowing that about the production of that, I kind of wish it hadn't happened. I mean, I don't know if I'm prepared to say it would have been worth losing Christmas specials forever, but I really kind of wish that The Doctor Falls was Capaldi's last episode, because I just feel like it's a stronger finish. It feels better. It feels more right. Whereas Twice Upon a Time, which is an episode I like, actually quite a bit, but coming off of this, that feels like an artificial lengthening, where this, The Doctor Falls, feels like the natural end for Capaldi, and it feels right. And I'm not one of those folks who's going to be like, in my head there is no Twice Upon a Time. Selective headcanon. I don't do that, but yeah, I will always kind of wish that this had been his closeout episode, because I just think it's a stronger finale for him as a character, and I think it is the best series finale of Doctor Who in the modern era. That's my ranking. You probably disagree with me, so why don't we talk about it? Drop something down in the comments. Give your thoughts on my list. Give me your own list. Just be polite about it. So there's that, and then there's all the things like liking and subscribing and supporting me on Patreon and buying a t-shirt and Twitter and podcasts and blah. Links for all that stuff is down in the description. So until next time, this council is adjourned.